There seems to be a trend going viral on TikTok where people talk about being chronically single. And since I got booted off TikTok, the way I found out about it was by watching some of the people on big YouTube channels reacting to it. And it blew my mind that in 2024, we still have such a difficulty having an honest conversation about what's going on in the world of dating nowadays. And instead we keep just, shuffling this Disney bullshit.
There will still be somebody out there for you. I believe that. If you, realign your priorities, if you do put yourself out there, if you become open and you're willing to be vulnerable.
And I think there are two primary reasons for why it is the way it is. And so number one is that having an honest conversation about it almost inevitably will make you sound bitter, because women are going to complain about men are going to blame everything on women and blah, blah, blah. So, it's going to sound salty and sour grapes and the rest of it. But the second reason is less obvious, and it is that a lot of people that maybe been in a relationship for a minute, or married or just long-term relationship, really do have quite outdated take on the situation. And I can see how it's quite difficult to accept the fact that things could really change so drastically in such a short period of time. So me and all my friends, we got married very young. I got married when I was barely 20. And although we were all, college students and nobodies, we all ended up with hot girls, really hot girls. And so if back then you were talking to me about hypergamy and alpha fox, beta box, I'd be like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, what planet are you from? But we all got divorced later on, and the difference was that my friends got divorced here in Ukraine, and I got divorced while already in New York. And so we had very different experiences. And so my friends got remarried, soon after, while me, years later, I still have PTSD when it comes to, marriage. And another thing that happened was that, me and my ex, we had a plan where she would go to college and I would support her, and then she would start working and I would go to college and she would support me. And, as Rollo Tomasi would say, hypergamy doesn't care. And so she threw me out during the very first semester of grad school. And as a guy that recently got discharged from the military, there weren't that many jobs that I qualified for. And so the one that I was able to find was being a bouncer, which actually ended up being a blessing in my life, because I was sort of forced into that world. And it became very apparent right from the start to me that things in dating have changed a lot. And I can see how, although I was married for only 10 years, but I can see how, if things worked out differently for me, even I would have difficulty time believing some of this, red pill, philosophy. And so let me just get all bitter and salty and sour grapes here and give you my take on the situation. And so let me start with car analogy. So let's say you want to buy a car. And so the question arises, what car are you going to get? Obviously, it's going to depend on your income, right? So if you're a McDonald's worker, maybe you'll get a Honda. If you are a brain surgeon, you will get Mercedes. And if you're a celebrity, maybe you'll get a Ferrari, right? And I think most of us would agree it's a fair system, because if McDonald's worker could afford the same lifestyle as a brain surgeon, what would be the point of going to fucking 100 years of school to become a brain surgeon, right? So it's a fair system. And I think it was the same with marriage. So McDonald's worker would get a girl, roughly speaking, obviously I'm simplifying, that's got 5 or 6 out of 10. Brain surgeon would get a girl that's like 7 or 8 out of 10. And then, if you're a celebrity, you would get 9 or 10. But the major caveat here is that since people used to get married young, you would, for the most part, get a girl that was untouched because she simply didn't have that much time to fuck around. And then on top of it, promiscuity was heavily shamed not that fucking long ago. And so, again, it's a fair deal because you have each other while you young, and now you get old. Now you have each other while you're older and wrinkly. I think once again, not many people would argue that that's an unfair system. But then, I'm speculating here, but this is what it looks like to me. Somewhere during the sexual revolution, women got clever and they realized that they could actually use that age range, let's say 18, 28, of that maximum female beauty to and exchange it for a whole range of extravagant experiences, and then get married right before hitting the wall. So as you might know, the average age of a woman getting married in the United States is like around 30 or something like that. And so, the new fashion became, be a whore in your 20s. But obviously, that's not, how we're going to present it. And so instead we came up with all these notions. Find yourself first, focus on your career, get it out of your system, get your education, get your bag, and blah, blah, blah. And right from the start, I'm going to say that all that is bullshit because, as I mentioned, we all got married early on, very young, and I don't remember any of that, marriage or having kids really becoming that big of a hurdle to, in getting education or having a career, because, all my friends are very educated and have successful businesses and so on. So, just let's just clarify that. That's all a lie. And so now, let's look at it from the men's perspective. And so now it's very much similar situation to if, let's say, I'm trying to buy a car once again, and so depending on my income, I'm going to the Lexus dealership or Toyota dealership, and so the salesperson is taking me, instead of taking me to the car lot with the new cars, is taking me to the car lot with the cars that have been rented out for 10 plus years, and tells me like, well, fuck, it's basically the same thing. Just been around a little bit. Why are you being insecure about it? You know what I'm saying? And so I think, once again, most of us will probably agree that that's not a fair deal. Like, I'm not gonna pay full price for the used car. And so, there are a lot of disparaging comments about incels and passport bras and men going their own way and so on. But if you really think about it, is it really that illogical that a lot of men are refusing to take that deal, especially if you consider all the other attributes that modern women in the West come with at 30 years old, like the weight, the body count, the masculinity, and you can imagine. I'm sure you can imagine. And so it shouldn't be that surprising, and that a lot of men are pulling out of dating and just, focus on video games or whatever, you know. But I would also argue that that's not a fair deal for women either. Because let's just imagine that I'm 18-year-old girl and I'm quite pretty, right? And hopefully I also know how to cook a little bit. I can have, for the most part, almost any man I want. You know, I have a golden ticket to sort of like a voucher that I can use to find a guy with the, you know, great job, big house, you know, cars and, you know, everything. I can have everything at 18 years old. But unfortunately, you know, I watched some Sex in the City, and also I'm following Kardashians on Instagram, and so I was told that I gotta get it out of my system, and so I guess that's what I'm gonna do. And so I can see how initially it's probably a mind-blowing experience for a young girl. Like at 18-year-old, you can have, you know, men throwing themselves at your feet. But as you get older and the body count sort of, you know, keeps going up, it's inevitable that, you know, the quality of those suitors will start to decline. And as a bouncer, I saw this many, many times. And so you have this young, beautiful girl showing up at the club, you know, your jaw drops to the floor. Like, I've seen some of the most beautiful girls I've ever seen when I was working at the club. And, you know, and to like, it's so like, almost like everybody's bowing down to her. And, you know, obviously she sits at the VIP initially. And maybe the owner's fucking her. And a little time passes and, you know, maybe the friend of the owner is fucking her. And then she moves to a regular table. And, you know, as this, you know, keeps rolling downhill, eventually she hits the rock bottom. And so now, what usually happens, that girl disappears. As a clockwork, a year or two later, Facebook post, she got married. But, you know, happy ending, right? But not really, because the guy that she got married to is nothing like she could have just few years ago. I said 18 to 28, that age range. But in reality, we all know that the decline happens way, way faster. You know, if you consider that lifestyle, you know, partying, drinking, smoking, fucking, tattoos, piercings, injections, excessive tanning, excessive makeup, you know, it doesn't take 10 years, that's for sure. And so basically what happens is that girl is using that, you know, golden ticket that I mentioned earlier, that she could use to set up the rest of her life. Instead, she used it, you know, to get some extravagant experiences for a few years. And so now let's say you take that girl at 30 and let's say her former classmate at 30, you know, they ended up, now they very much at the same place, you know, and the only difference between them is she did have those experiences and the guy didn't. But from now on, their life is going to look very much similar. And even if they did get married at 30, just likely, well, probably rather, and you should be able to see how neither one of them is getting what they really want at this point, because he's getting a whore and she's getting a guy that is nothing like she could have just a few years ago. And so I would argue that both genders are getting screwed with the way we do things nowadays. And the only people who benefit from this new way of doing marriage are the guys that get to cycle through all these girls in their 20s, like, you know, your high value man. I hate that term, but it's just what everybody's using nowadays. And so they can have these girls at their peak beauty without any commitment being demanded from them, because, you know, we're just having fun and, you know, discovering ourselves. And they also have no incentive to give any of those girls commitment because, next year there's going to be a new crop of girls turning 18 and starting their journey of self-discovery,
I get older, they stay the same age.
As I said, I don't believe that anybody really wins with this new way of doing things. And here, in fact, I listed some of the factors that contributed to this decline in relationships. But first, I just want to say a few more words about how I started noticing these things. And the way I started noticing these things was by raising my daughter. So my daughter moved in with me when she was 12, and so dangerous age for to have girls, to have daughters. I can tell you that at very least. And so what I realized when I was raising her is that basically, aside from the father, almost the whole world is trying to turn your daughter into a whore. If you think about it, all her classmates, all her co-workers are trying to fuck her. Her girlfriend's dragging her into degeneracy, almost guaranteed. She gets bombarded with degeneracy on social media, on TV. It's basically the only one that stands in the way is the father's trying, father against the whole world. And I would argue that not the mothers, because I think mothers also turning their daughters into whores, and not necessarily by teaching them, to be straight up a whore. Although I have seen it. So it seems that a lot of mothers living vicariously through their daughters, and it's sort of like, well, if I was at their age, I would have OnlyFans, or I would be posting those pictures on Instagram. So they sort of, kind of almost encourage that. But, let's be honest, that's not most of the mothers. And the way most of the mothers turning their daughters into whores is by not teaching them traditional values. And so all my friends here, they have families. Pretty much all of the women, they got married young, they had kids right away, a lot of them are housewives, some of them never had a fucking job, so very much traditional, lifestyle. But for some reason, they decided that that's not the way to do it, and they raise their daughters in some fucking modern way, and it's like, it's a whole it's like, telling them that, all this shit that in fact I mentioned earlier, focus on your career first, have fun, get it out of your system, and not teaching them how to cook, and all this, very strange upbringing, and just by, I believe that by not teaching them conservative values, it creates that vacuum in their daughter's head that's gonna suck in all this degeneracy. And as a lot of us know, the girl's beauty comes many years before the brain kicks in, right? So, and that's why, I grew up with a sister. It was parents' job to sort of postpone their daughter's exposure to all the, to sexualization as long as possible. So hopefully by the time she actually faces it, she's mature enough to handle it properly. But that's not what we're doing right now at all, it seems like, because like I see kids, full makeup, nails, kids are allowed to stay out much longer than it was back, when I was growing up with my sister, and and the rest of all these other things. And so I do believe that a lot of mothers directly or indirectly turning their daughters into whores. And as I said, the only one standing in its way is the father, if the father's present. So that's why, the absence of father, single mother families, I would consider a red flag. So now let's look at some of the factors that, in my estimation, have led to deterioration of relationships between men and women. And so the first one I listed here is the birth control. Probably huge accomplishment for our civilization, but now without some unintended consequences, as we will see later on. And so, as you can imagine, before the invention of contraception, having sex outside of marriage was a big no-no because of the risk of unintended pregnancy. And so now you have these young, fertile, girls and boys that crave intimacy very much, and the only way to have sex was to get married. So fuck it, let's get married. And so people would get married, very young, and probably conceive their first child on their wedding night, which would further solidify their marriage and became this, beautiful, fairy tale story. So, this one is pretty straightforward. Moving on, and the second one I listed is feminism. So just like a birth control pill was probably a good thing initially. And so I'm not a historian, I don't really know about different waves of feminism or whatever. But, as a father, both of my kids, my son and my daughter in their 20s, in 2024, it would be difficult for me to imagine that, let's say, my son would have a right to vote and my daughter wouldn't, right? So I think almost everybody would agree with that. But the way I imagine it, as things became more and more equal between genders, at some point, a lot of these feminists had choice to make. Maybe, either we keep fighting, or maybe it's time to get a, regular job. And so just imagine some woman, she's an activist, purple hair, flashing her tits in front of the White House somewhere, and next thing you know, she has to go and start, working like a real job. So it's, not that difficult to see how a lot of them would choose to keep fighting. And so it was inevitable that feminism would become more and more radical over time. And so, as I argued in my previous video, it does appear that feminism has turned into this anti-man, pro-lesbian propaganda. And so, as I mentioned in that video, I have a lot of my friends have families with teenage daughters, and so oftentimes we have various discussions on related topics. It's very shocking for me to find out that these girls already have so much bullshit in their heads that's, very difficult to see where all that is coming from, because, they live in these households where I would argue that women, for the most part, wear pants and run the show, and yet, you hear them, these girls talking about how, I'm never getting married, this husband's gonna lock me up in the kitchen and then smack me around on top of it, and it makes you wonder, like, where did you see that? How is that possible that a young girl already has so much, hate towards men? And I don't want to start any conspiracies here, but, it's interesting how when it comes to Ukraine, like, we are decades behind on, like, a lot of things. Like, let's say medicine. I work in a hospital in New York, and I go to a hospital here. it's very obvious that, we're at least few, like 20 years behind, in a lot of aspects. But feminism is already here. So again, don't want to start any conspiracies here, but somebody's doing it somehow, and this poison is very much here, once again, for a lot of you passport bros. Feminism is very much here. And I also argued in that video that it does appear to me, maybe I'm crazy, that feminism is turning into this pro-lesbian propaganda. Because if you think about it, promiscuity is very much part of the agenda when it comes to the feminism, right? It's not like they're teaching girls to keep their knees closed. But if you combine that with the anti-male message, with the constant anti-male message, it makes you wonder, like, who are they supposed to be intimate with? And so the answer is clear: other girls. And so is it really that surprising that more and more girls identify themselves on this LGBT whatever spectrum? So that's as far as feminism. So I think a lot of us by now have noticed that there seems to be a severe lack of talent in our entertainment industry in general. And then on top of it, we are constantly being bombarded with all these woke messages, and with feminism being very much part of the overall doctrine. And so it also seems that nobody cares that all that is being done at the expense of the quality of those movies and the performance at the box office, and the performance of the company at the stock exchange. So I remember when Disney announced the streaming service, I started buying the shares of Disney. I think I started at 130 something, and then I kept buying all the way to 190s. Because if you think about it, with all the stuff that Disney has, the Marvel, Star Wars, the parks, and just everything they have, they just seem fucking unstoppable. Like Amazon Prime, Apple, and Netflix combined couldn't possibly match that. It just seemed like there was no way for them to do it wrong. And yet they fucking managed to fuck it all up. I think their shares right now are not even half of what they used to be at their highest. And it's interesting that people that have significant money invested in Disney are not able to turn the company around and get it back on track. But instead, it very much seems that they keep digging in their heels and keep pushing with the message. And so instead, they trying to explain the lousy performance at the box office by blaming the patriarchy, right? And so all these insecure men just having trouble with strong female character. Well, I would argue that that's not the case, because when Mr. and Mrs. Smith came out, well, you had problem with strong female character, and I believe everybody loved that movie. And the difference with that movie when compared to these modern strong female character movies is that that movie didn't automatically mean that all the men have to be portrayed as the fucking bumbling idiots, unlike it is now. And so for somebody who's growing up, that could be just like annoying after a while. But just imagine, let's say, these teenage girls that I keep mentioning here. Let's say that's all you see, is just men being portrayed that way, and then on top of these other derogating messages against men. Is there a chance that, you might grow up with certain skewed impression of men? Probably. And Another thing about it is that this assault seems to be very much asymmetrical because, let's say, I very much enjoy Everybody Loves Raymond. It reminds me of my marriage a lot, admittedly, you know. But think about it, what is the equivalent of that where genders are reversed? When, let's say, the husband is the squared away stud and the woman is this idiot that doesn't know what time it is, you know, and you never see that. So it's very much asymmetrical. And, you know, like I said, it doesn't take a lot of garbage like Enola Holmes
I don't want a husband.
and so on to sort of infect a young, impressionable mind with, you know, certain ideas. Now, the second problem with the Hollywood is its unrealistic representation of relationships. So let me just use an analogy here once again. So if you are like me and you have a sibling relatively close in age, the chances are you probably didn't think that your sibling was the coolest person, and if you didn't get stuck in the same house, you probably wouldn't end up being friends. So me and my sister, we fought all the way until we hit puberty, and that was too big. And, you know, violence became, you know, out of question for her. So in any case, but since we were stuck in the same house, we had to work things out and eventually became friends. And so I'm sure it's the same for a lot of you guys. And now, for example, in my case, my sister has access to all my bank accounts due to various reasons. And I believe that, you know, it was very similar to marriage back in the day. You know, people realized that, look, I'm not perfect, you're not perfect, let's see if we can make it work and, you know, grow old together. But now that we're constantly being bombarded with, you know, these unrealistic representations of relationships, you know, the husband comes from work and they hold hands and discuss how your day went, and then they have dinner with fucking 100 of candles. I don't know who's lighting up all these candles. That itself would just take an hour. And, you know, then they have dinner, and then they have sex all night. But then in the morning somehow he has enough energy to go for a jog, and she does Pilates. And then they have their smoothies and go to work, you know, and live happily ever after, you know. I've been around some wealthy people in America, and my friends here are pretty well off. I can tell you, I've never seen anybody having a relationship that's even close to that, you know. But since that's all we see on TV, sooner or later, you know, you start sort of comparing your relationship to what's being, you know, presented. And I believe that it can eventually become like this little hurdle for things to work, for your particular marriage to work out. Now, the third one here is the Hollywood promotes promiscuity. So here, I think Sex and the City probably comes to mind immediately. But for me, so I actually been forced to watch Sex and the City when I was married. And for me, it's sort of like this ultimate female fantasy, right? So like girls shopping and fucking shoes, and this girl getting all this attention from men, despite her being probably in her 50s at least. You know, it's like ultimate female fantasy, and it's kind of obvious that's what it is, because it's in the name. It's Sex in the City, you know what I'm saying? So obviously it's obvious what they're trying to portray in that movie. But in my opinion, when it comes to this, movies with Julia Roberts very much lead the charge, and because it's very much the same message when it comes to promiscuity, but it's not presented as just being a horse. And instead, it's presented as this like romantic journey of self-discovery, right? So obviously, Eat, Pray, Love comes to mind. This woman, she realized she wasn't happy. He wasn't the one, and so she went on this journey around the world to find herself and blah blah blah. It's very romantic, but if you really think what the fuck is happening in that movie, this bitch decided to ruin her marriage. Fuck their marriage vows. Fuck this guy's feelings. I'm just gonna go and be a hoe. It's very much Sex in the City, but it's once again it's very romantic. It's she's trying to find her, she's trying to be happy, blah 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 blah. Another one is Runaway Bride. Again, he wasn't the one, blah blah blah. She's looking for true love, right? Who can blame her? But what is really happening in that movie? Just imagine being a groom. All this financial expenses, on the wedding, all your relatives are there, and then your bride fucking runs away. Imagine the embarrassment. Imagine, and yet it's supposed to be romantic somehow, even funny in a way, right? So, but now just imagine again, once again, take these teenage girls watching that couple of movies like that. This fucking bitch is running away from the wedding. You think this girl is gonna feel bad about not showing up on a date and maybe not even texting you that she's not coming? Fuck that. That seems like nothing compared to running away from the wedding, right? So, like I said, it seems like the things have changed in relationships like pretty suddenly recently, right? But if you kind of start to think about a lot of these things, we've been conditioning fucking psychopathic behaviors in women towards men for fucking decades. Then you can just go on, you can just keep listing movies on and on and on, and you will see how this fucking degeneracy was like programmed into girls like for decades by now. And so it's a really big mystery why girls are so flaky in dating, or even maybe something even more vicious, like maybe some false allegations where a woman completely doesn't give a fuck that she can get somebody in jail and ruin somebody's reputation. She's just trying to get her back. It's psychopathic, and it's been happening right under our noses for fucking decades. The next one we're going to discuss is the social media. So when I moved to Ukraine, it took me a while, but eventually I realized that I'm going to have to open a new Instagram because, when I was trying to post something, I had constantly had to decide, like, do I make title in Ukrainian or in English? So I took a bunch of my favorite pictures that I had digitally and I uploaded them in more or less chronological order. And so once I was done, I looked over it, it's like, oh man, look at this. I've been quite busy. But then, of course, I realized that that wasn't quite, my life, and that's not the life that I live. And in fact, there was more like just few moments of my life per year. That's what that profile represented. Because, even if you take, like me standing next to like some pyramid in Mexico, for example, that's not even the day of my life. That's just a moment of me standing there. I still had to get up in the morning, use the bathroom, brush my teeth, have breakfast, get on the bus, drive, 2 hours, get in line, blah, blah, blah. And then eventually I took that picture. And, but of course, all that other stuff doesn't show up on our profile. And instead, all we see is highlights. And everybody's doing it. People select the best pictures, the best angles, best lighting, then now we add the filters on top of it. And so when you scroll through the social media, all you see is just people having these like fancy, incredible lives.
They're way better looking than they basically really are.
Right.
And they're way happier seeming than they really are.
And it's very much similar to the Hollywood, but the difference here now that these are not, you know, when you watch movie, like you have some common sense to know that, you know, it's a fucking movie. But these are, when it comes to social media, these are your friends, and, you know, everybody is living just this, it seems like everybody besides you is living this incredible life. And, you know, I think by now everybody knows about it. The social media, for the most part, makes us very unhappy, and you know the data shows that there's like a spike of depression correlated with the, you know, social media going mainstream. And how did this contribute to the? And so it goes to both, you know, men and women, and as a matter of fact, it seems that it affects women even more. But then, what does it have to do with the relationships? Well, it actually affects it quite directly, because now let's say you have, you know, maybe you're watching a game with your girl and she's on her phone, you know, and you're sitting there watching the game, but all she sees is her friends, you know, on a yacht in Greece, in the club, whatever, you know. And it's very likely that at some point she'll be like, you know, start, you know, maybe fidgeting, like, you know, and meanwhile I'm here watching the fucking game with this loser. And so next thing you know, she picks a fight over nothing and breaks up with you, and you don't know what the fuck happened. And so some might say that, like, well, fuck, he didn't, you know, try hard enough. You know, he didn't live up to her expectation. But the problem is, of course, that nobody can really live up to those expectations, because she's not comparing you to any particular guy. She's comparing you to the rest of the world, basically, because as you sitting there and watching that game, she's getting invites, you know, from all these men, like, hey, come with me to Spain, or like, oh, let's come to me on the yacht, and blah, blah, blah. So her being in a relationship with you blocks her from all of that simultaneously. And so, like I said, unless you are very much a top G, almost nobody can match that, and can compete that with that rather. And so another thing here is that it creates, as I mentioned here, as she gets all these invites, it creates all these this illusion that, you know, she can be with any of those men. And then on top of it, it also makes it very easy to get in touch with all those, you know, possible alternative options.
There's a chapter in my book called "If We Were Going to Invent an Infidelity Generating Machine, It Would Be Called Facebook." I would change that now to say it would be called Instagram.
Right, so here you are sitting, you know, here she is sitting next to you watching that game, and very much exploring her other, you know, suitors. Like, so now, like it was back in the day, you know, when, you know, oh, this guy has a potential, she would have to like sneak out, you know, the house somehow and make, you know, lie about it and maybe get a cup of coffee with him to see what's going on. And now all this is happening while she's sitting like right next to you, and the guy can't, it would be very insecure and controlling of a guy to say anything about it, because it's just a fucking Instagram, right? Like, it's not like it's a real dating app. But then, of course, it is a real dating app, and maybe some guys are not aware of it, but I believe most of the girls are very much aware of it, and that's why they never really post, almost never post pictures with their, you know, boyfriends or husbands on Instagram. So a good friend of mine got married, and so, you know, their wife got pregnant right away. And so what she did, she took like probably like hundreds of pictures right away in different dresses, different bikinis, on the different places, and so on. And so as she was going through her pregnancy, she kept posting that, you know, all those pictures that she collected early on. And so if you look at her profile, you know, you would not get impression that she's a married woman with a kid. You know, she's very much single woman on her profile, looking for her soulmate. And so, I don't know, maybe that's completely unrelated, but, you know, a year into it, they don't live together anymore. And, you know, I don't know if it has anything to do with Instagram, but I would argue that it does. Now, the last one here, what is it? Oh yeah, just the same as was the Hollywood. Social media is very much, seems to be the place for propagation of these very much anti-male messages, like, you know, I don't need no man, me too, I'd rather get stuck in the woods with the bear than a man and shit, male ego is so fragile, you know, and all this other stupid shit. And just like with the Hollywood, it does seem to be very much asymmetrical once again, because you have all these girls, you know, sometimes it seems like there are straight up tutorials that women do for other women, you know, on how to finesse man. But then, you know, if the man trying to say anything that sounds unflattering to women, you know, it's fucking Tinder swindler, and, you know, you get demonetized and maybe even booted off altogether. Like, I got booted off TikTok within days, not even a week, which is fucking amazing. And again, you know, as an adult, maybe you can process it a little bit and filter most of that bullshit out. But again, imagine this young girl, you know, just scrolling through that, and that's all she sees. Like, you know, hopefully you guys starting to get the picture I'm trying to paint for you here. You know, is it really a mystery that she's gonna have a little bit of the, you know, weird impression of men in her life, and be maybe a little suspicious and cautious and whatever. So the last one I listed here is the family court laws, and I'm not going to go into too much detail on this one, because it seems that no matter what data I present here to show how men are being screwed by the unfair divorce laws, there will be somebody who's going to show data that shows the very opposite, and the women actually get fucked over by the divorce. And so it seems that citing scientific research is turning more and more into a joke, especially in the fields of sociology and psychology, I would say. And so at this point, we just have to believe our own eyes, our own anecdotal evidence. And so what my eyes are telling me is that men get their lives ruined by the divorce, not the women. So I know plenty of men who's got their lives flipped upside fucking down by the divorce. And although I know plenty of women who are divorced, it doesn't sound like anything, doesn't sound like, you know, it sounds more like a happy ending if anything. And I don't know any woman that pays alimony or child support, you know, so I don't know. And, you know, I just want to be clear, I'm a very much a proponent of marriage, but, you know, and secretly I kind of hope that maybe I'll get married once again and find the one and do right this time. But realistically speaking, the way we do marriage these days is very much downside for men, let's be honest. And in the best case scenario, you'll get stuck with the used car for the rest of your life. And in the worst case scenario, that fucking car is gonna flip your life upside fucking down. And so what I my view on marriage sort of evolved into that marriage is sort of like a luxury, so that only very wealthy can afford. So if you can lose half of what you got, and then, you know, after divorce and all the legal fees, and still be okay, then you know what? maybe marriage is a good deal for you. And especially if you are at that point, you have that status and wealth, there's also probably higher chance that you will not get your life flipped upside down, because it would be hard for a woman to look for something even higher, although that's questionable, of course. But still, if you're still okay after losing half of what you got, fuck it, go for it, Maybe things will work out, hope for the best. But even then, I would still say, you should still be cautious and obviously get a prenup, obviously, go through the vetting process and make sure that you're not marrying a straight up psychopath. And another factor that you should probably take into account, even if you are very wealthy, is the number of kids that you are planning on having. So I'll give you one story. I know this person, a doctor in a quite lucrative specialty, within a quite lucrative specialty, and so he makes a lot of money, but he got divorced when he had like 4 or 5 kids, so his the child support is like 40 or something %, which you have to take into account that that's before tax. So that's taken out, and meaning that you still have to pay tax on full amount, then take that 40% before tax. And so you would say, he's a high earner, so he's definitely in a high bracket. So his tax is like maybe 40%, and his child support is 40%. So he gets left with 20%, if that. I'm not sure about the math here. But the point here that without any fucking exaggeration, this guy lives in poverty, although he works his ass off. And so it's not like he has to kind of suck it up for just a little bit and then it's going to be, things will get better. Fuck no. Because I think a lot of people talk about how, child support is only until, kids turn 18. Well, no. Maybe it varies by state, but I know that in New York, if the child decides to go to college, the child support continues all the way until the fucking kid is 24. So when I was 24, I had 2 kids. I had a degree in Ukraine. I was serving in the United States military. And yet, if I had a kid at the same age, and in the United States, I would still have to fucking pay child support for that kid at 24. So I don't know. Maybe this shit is a little crazy if you ask me. And so now imagine this guy, his life is basically ruined. He has nothing to look for. By the time, all his kids are 24, he's going to be like fucking 60 or 70. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? His life is over.
Over 400,000 men have committed suicide. And from my research, roughly 70% have had contact with family court in the last 5 years. This is literally killing men and nobody cares. And they just say, men, man up and marry anyway.
And so if me, making these posters and doing all this talking here for almost an hour saves even one person from that, maybe it was time and effort well spent, and just, you're welcome, because, and this is sort of, I would say, the overall purpose of this channel in general. I'm just trying to share the helpful pieces of information I've come across with you guys. So mostly through shorts, and you might notice that I recently started recommending books on this channel as well. And a lot of it has to do with dating, and I think this is an area where men are very fucking confused, and I think it's probably not a very good thing, because I would speculate that if we take, let's say, all the young men deleting themselves, and then the school shooters and all this other stuff, if there is one common denominator in all of those situations, is that they are probably not spoiled with choice when it comes to women. And so I would argue that, having men confused when it comes to dealing with women, having a lot of men confused when it comes to dealing with women is probably a dangerous thing. And another area that I think a lot of men are confused in is the area of fitness and nutrition. And so I see fucking people being put on Ozempic that don't know anything about nutrition. I see young men, going talking about TRT. They don't know what the fuck is. They don't know anything about resistance training. Like I think TRT, just like we normalized promiscuity over the past few decades. I think this is what's happening with steroid use. We're trying to normalize it. With the TRT, young men going on TRT, what the fuck are you talking about? And so, once again, a shameless plug. If you do want to learn about fitness and want to stay away from all that bullshit, I'm going to recommend my books. So, Fit in 1 Year and Big and Strong Without Steroids. So, this is just me trying to push against that new wave of degeneracy that seems to be coming. And so I know it's not very humble of me to be saying all this, but I have all the major books on resistance training. In fact, all the main prints, they're printed in Russian or English or Ukrainian. And I can tell you that if I thought that any of that was better than my books, I wouldn't be publishing my books, okay? There would be no point in me publishing my books. So this is very much a hill that I'm willing to die on. That, I do think that this is the best you can find. And so hopefully this helps as well, if you want to check it out. But otherwise, this is it. This is all I got for you guys. So thank you for watching, and, be kind enough to give it a like.